You know the cartoon, you know that glorious hairdo, and of course you remember having the power. But most of all, you remember the toys, where kids from the 80s could have the power in the comforts of their own homes and play with their He-Man action figures and He-Man playsets and vehicles. But above all, He-Man was the defender of the secrets of Castle Grayskull and champion hero of the mystical world of Eternia. A bulging muscle man who gets superhuman strength by summoning magical powers from his power sword.
How original!
An action-packed story full of many characters, not forgetting of course He-Man's ultimate foe, the evil Skeletor, who wants to steal the secrets of Grayskull for his own evil use.
Listen, I am not nice, I am not kind, and I am not wonderful.
Yes, over the years we have seen He-Man comics, TV shows, toys, and even a movie, which oddly features a lot of fried chicken, as over the years He-Man has become a celebrated piece of childhood pop culture that is adored by all ages.
So get ready to have the power, as today we open up the secrets of Grayskull and look into 10 things that you may not know about He-Man. So before we can ask how can a superhero have a dual identity just by removing their clothes, let's check it out.
Number 10. He-Man exists because of Star Wars. In the late 70s, toy company Mattel had huge success with Hot Wheels and Barbie, but hadn't struck gold yet in the action figure market. But after a space movie called Star Wars came out, the game had now changed, as toy company Kenner struck gold with their 3.75-inch Star Wars action figures. The irony being, Mattel was offered to create the Star Wars action figures by Lucasfilm, but turned it down, not thinking that it would be successful. Whoops. So Mattel knew that this was the future of toys. So Mattel tried at toy lines with Flash Gordon and Battlestar Galactica, but were ultimately unsuccessful. So Mattel decided to create their own toy line franchise. Enter toy designer Roger Sweet, who wanted to focus on a toy hero whose main attribute was muscle-bound strength. A figure so strong and toned he would overshadow all them pesky Star Wars figures. And thus He-Man was born. Number 9. Early designs. In the early days of He-Man's designs, he looked quite different to how he would eventually look. The then dark-haired warrior more resembled a barbarian, much in the same vein as Conan the Barbarian. As it seemed, a muscle-bound ancient warrior was the look that Mattel was going for.
He may be huge, but he's still a little baby at heart.
It was also important to give He-Man a battle face, as if the figure itself was in the middle of battle, as Sweet felt that most action figures at that time just had boring plain looks on their faces. In fact, 3 prototypes were created in order to try and come up with a champion hero for Mattel to base its new figurine toy brand on. The other 2 candidates were Tankhead and Bullethead, who surprisingly looked a lot like Boba Fett from Star Wars.
Yeah, had they gone with that design, it wouldn't have been about having the power, but more about having the power of a good lawyer when getting sued for copyright infringement.
Number 8. He-Man originally couldn't fit in his own castle. Castle Grayskull is the mystical and powerful fortress of Eternia, which acts as a home for the sorceress and a sort of command center for He-Man. And of course, we're all familiar with Grayskull thanks to its iconic look of having a giant skull-like face at the castle's entrance. However, Grayskull was originally created as a toy for children to have a unique and alien setting, one that was different when playing with their He-Man action figures, to have something weird and otherworldliness. It also acted as a storage case for the figures themselves, which was pretty cool. No Star Wars figures allowed, I guess. However, when the Grayskull prototype was made, the mouth door was too small for the He-Man action figure to get inside. Yep, He-Man's head was too big for Castle Grayskull.
Uh-oh, that wall looks hungry.
Toy designer and artist Mark Taylor insisted that kids could just, turn their He-Man action figures on their side and have them enter the castle that way. But it was probably felt that that didn't look very cool or dynamic, so thankfully the castle was redesigned with a door that could accommodate for the muscle-bound buff that is He-Man.
Oh, thank God too. I mean, just imagine if in the cartoon, He-Man entered Grayskull by sort of turning to his side and going in head first. Yeah, not very dynamic or heroic, is it?
Number 7. The hideous backstory behind Skeletor. A hero can only be as good as his villain, and He-Man has the most memorable villain in the form of Skeletor, quite possibly one of the greatest bad guys to come out of the 1980s. The iconic skull face and hood with muscular form as strong as He-Man's instantly made him a fan favourite.
I could write a book about what you don't know.
But where did this crazy bone-faced ghoul come from? Well, thankfully we had the toys that made us to help us with that one, as Skeletor was created by the as-mentioned Mark Taylor, and his genesis for the character dates all the way back to a creepy real-life experience he had when he was a kid, where one day he was at an amusement park, where he visited a haunted house-style attraction, and inside the creepy funhouse was a real-life decaying body with a decayed skull-like face, which absolutely terrified young Taylor and lingered in his mind throughout his life, till he used the terrifying experience as a source of inspiration to create Skeletor.
Kudos to Taylor. Had that happened to me, I don't think I would be inventing Skeletor, but rather having therapy.
Number 6. Alternative title. Originally, the He-Man brand was simply called He-Man, both short and sweet and straight to the point. However, Mattel's marketing division weren't happy with the title and felt that it lacked the punch that other toy brands like Star Wars had. So a new name for the franchise had to be created, and several names that were proposed for this epic battle of muscle bulging good and skeletal evil included Lords of Power. But that was rejected as it was considered too religious. So then literally at the last minute, Masters of the Universe was put together, to which Mattel accepted despite the fact that those behind He-Man actually didn't like the name as they thought it was, quote, bragging.
You should be ashamed of yourself.
Honest men doing honest day's work.
But let's be honest, when we were kids, we didn't call the cartoon Masters of the Universe, we just simply called it He-Man. I mean, come on, I did not know one other kid who called it Masters of the Universe.
Number 5. The cartoons were created to give the toys a backstory. So when the powers behind the He-Man, now Masters of the Universe brand, were about ready to release their battle figures in 1982, the big question was asked. How would kids know who these characters are, and why would they be interested? So it was decided to package each figure with its own pocket-sized comic book, which gave each character a backstory, so kids knew which figure was good and which ones were villains. Problem solved, right? Well, no, as it was then put forth that most kids who would be playing with the action figures probably didn't read yet, so it was then decided to have a cartoon tie-in to go with the figures. The original plan was to have a few animated specials, but then Filmation got on board and an entire series was created. The cartoon did change some of the backstory that Mattel had already created, namely giving He-Man a Clark Kent-style alter ego, in the form of the bumbling Prince Adam. And the show was more comical and light-hearted than originally planned.
I like getting a tan, but this is ridiculous.
But hey, it's the oddball antics of the show that made it so memorable.
Ah, just what everybody needs, a magical island holiday.
The show was also known for its closing moral lessons, in order to convince parents that what their kids was watching wasn't just a toy commercial, but it could also educate their kids too.
Drugs don't make your problems go away. They just create more.
Number 4. She-Ra was created because of a huge female fan base. Even though He-Man was marketed as a boy's product, 20% of the fan base was in fact young girls, who also wanted to join in the epic battles of Eternia. So much so, the He-Man toy brand was by far outperforming female market toy lines, such as Barbie. So to continue this success of making Masters of the Universe enjoyable entertainment for little girls, She-Ra was created, so young females watching could have an alternative hero that they could root for. Where in 1985, He-Man's twin sister, Adora, started her own exciting battles of good versus evil with her own series and toy range.
I am She-Ra!
To which the She-Ra, the Princess of Power brand became just as big and as influential as He-Man itself, proving that badass adventures involving monsters really can run in the family. Number 3. HeMan Did Battle with Superman. He-Man may be the most powerful being of Eternia, but how would Grayskull's champion fare up against the last son of Krypton himself, Superman? Well, to the joy of lovers of both franchises, they got to see this epic confrontation in a DC comic special called Superman and the Masters of the Universe, where a portal from Eternia to Earth is opened. And when investigating, Superman goes through the portal to Eternia, and after a brief battle with He-Man, Superman and He-Man eventually join forces to stop Skeletor.
Alright, stop! Stop! That's enough!
Who knows, maybe He-Man's mother is also secretly called Martha.
A story about a portal going from Eternia to Earth. This does sound familiar.
But while we talk about the stars who may have come into contact with He-Man, what about the stars behind the show? The actors who lent their voices to He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Well, He-Man was voiced by actor John Irwin, who also voiced other characters like Reggie Mantle from Archie, the mascot Morris the Cat, and also did minor voice work for popular movies such as Back to the Future Part 2 and Babe. Alan Oppenheimer voiced many characters, including Skeletor, Battle Cat, Cringer, and Man-at-Arms. He starred in many well-known movies and TV shows over the years, as well as lending his voice to many other popular characters, like Mighty Mouse, Falcor from The Neverending Story, and Alfred Pennyworth. Lou Scheimer, who was also the show's executive producer, also lent his voice to several characters, including Orko and Mossman. And I'm sure, unlike the Mossman action figure, he didn't smell like crap. Linda Gary provided the voice to many of the female characters, like Teela, Evelyn, and the Sorceress. She also had voice parts in other animated features, like the Smurfs, Transformers, the new Scooby and Scrappy-Doo show, and was Aunt May in the popular 90s Spider-Man cartoon. She-Ra was voiced by Melendi Britt, who has featured in many popular TV shows, including The Love Boat, The Incredible Hulk, and Taxi. Not to mention the fact that she has also done a lot of voice work in her career. Number 2. The movie was an attempt to keep the toys alive. Now, the concept of a live-action He-Man wasn't completely unheard of, as in 1986, there was a stage show called Masters of the Universe Power Tour, in which parents can take their hyperactive, restless kids to see a He-Man adventure on stage, no doubt to keep the little brats quiet for an hour or so, which actually featured performers as the characters from the cartoon. And to be honest, for what it was, they actually looked pretty good, as each character was brought to life and looks very accurate to their cartoon counterparts. However, also at this stage of the He-Man timeline, there was an unavoidable, impending problem facing the franchise. Although He-Man and the Masters of the Universe had great success in the early 80s, as the later days kicked in, so did children's love for other new franchises, such as Transformers and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Within 1 year, the toy profits dropped from $400 million to a measly $7 million. Wow. So clearly it was time to take a new approach, to breathe new life into the franchise. So the Canon-produced Masters of the Universe movie was released in 1987. The exciting He-Man movie, where we see our heroes from the mystical world of Eternia go on an adventure to, New Jersey? In a film that mainly follows a young Courtney Cox and her teenage anxieties about leaving her boyfriend and dealing with the death of her parents.
If you break up with Kevin Corrigan, you will regret it for the rest of your life.
Yeah, this movie did stray far away from the original source material, to say the least. Even the movie's star Dolph Lundgren, who played He-Man, felt weird about it, as he was, in his own words, playing an action figure. a toy. And supposedly, even Sylvester Stallone visited the set and was absolutely shocked and surprised that Dolph Lundgren was given such a huge leading role, as apparently back then his English and acting ability was very limited.
I'll never kneel to you!
Although the movie has since gained a cult status and considered by many to be so bad it's good, and admittedly I do find the movie to be lots of fun, back in the late 80s it disappointed fans with its weird direction and lack of consistency with the cartoon, and thus it didn't really help the He-Man brand.
It tasted good.
Needless to say, a planned sequel was scrapped and Canon Films went bankrupt. But many fans insist that one major highlight of the movie was Frank Langella's enthusiastic performance as Skeletor.
Let this be our final battle!
Number 1. He-Man in Space. The original He-Man cartoon only consisted of 2 seasons, with no more series being made after 1985, or 1987 if you want to include the She-Ra series. But in a last-ditch effort to keep He-Man alive, a new cartoon and toy line were released in 1990, called The New Adventures of He-Man. But just like the Masters of the Universe movie, it didn't catch on, as it strayed too far away from the source material. It no longer felt mystical with its sword and sorcery fantasy aesthetic, but felt more space age, with more of a science fiction element. When the show was broadcast, originally I actually didn't even know that it was He-Man until I saw a commercial for the figures. And it just felt weird as He-Man didn't match what he had previously looked like. He was now more slimmed down, had blue pants and a ponytail, which proved to be an unpopular makeover to the fanbase. The show only lasted of 1 season before being cancelled and slipping into obscurity. There has been other He-Man content made since, like a 2002 revival series. Now I didn't get into the show at the time as I had grown up, but my little nephews loved it, and the animation was pretty spectacular, as it takes the old look of the show and updates it. And to the best of my knowledge, this series is fondly remembered. Then there was a reimagined series on Netflix in 2021, which took a more 3D animation approach. And finally, the recent Masters of the Universe revelation. And to me, the show was... ugh. But regardless, the original Masters of the Universe is considered a classic, one of the greatest cartoons and toy lines of the 80s, and something that played an influential part in many people's childhoods. It's the ultimate battle of good versus evil, where of course good always prevails, as goodness will always have the power. So sometimes when the modern world seems mean and unfair, sometimes it helps to go back and visit those more innocent moments from a more innocent time.
Well guys, that was my look into He-Man, a name that has become a prominent part to many people's childhoods and the 80s in general. A show that allowed us to go to the strange world of Eternia and go on many exciting adventures. Anyway, I'm Minty, and I have the power, and so do you. See ya. The power to click thumbs up.